Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 4 of the Boardmen Don't Get Paid podcast. I'm your host, Dhruv, joined by my co-host, Lawrence. How's it going, Lawrence?
How's it going? It's going well.
It's an interesting day. We just got news that Antonio Brown will be playing Monday night, so it seems like the entire thing was blown out of proportion yet
Why is
again
that?
for the Raiders.
Why is this the first thing that we talk about? Is Antonio Brown? He's not even relevant to
Because
Sunday.
Raider games and the Raiders are important to me. But I'm just covering some NFL news. Yesterday's game was atrocious. That was extremely boring to watch. Uh,
It was
but
only boring if you didn't bet the under.
did you bet the under?
I didn't, so it was boring to me, especially more so because I bet on the Bears.
Ouch. I'm okay with that because the Raiders have their draft pick. But yeah, anyway, we are here today to discuss daily fantasy sports, also known as DFS, and gambling. So in previous episodes, we've kind of just talked about the sport itself or season-long fantasy. Now we're getting into more like specialized stuff that deals with money. So DFS and gambling. Could you kind of give the audience a little bit of overview on how DFS works and what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so first things first is you want to be very responsible with how you allot your money, especially because when things like DFS and gambling come into play, you're putting money at stake, and you want to make sure that you're not just throwing money away, and you want to gamble without being emotional, and so when you go on tilts, make sure you stop. Don't put in any more money. DFS works the same way as gambling. I think it's very easy for you to kind of over budget yourself for stuff like this. But so we've both been DFS players for quite a while now. For me, it's been like 4 years. I know it's been around the same time for you too as well, Drew, right?
Yep, yep.
Yeah, and so we're coming from a place where we've learned kind of how the game has evolved over the years, and we've also learned a lot of what not to do. And so when you're just starting off, I think it's good to learn from other people's mistakes, and we're here to kind of help you out with navigating this kind of industry.
Well said.
So yeah, on to DFS though. Like basically what happens, we're going to just talk about DraftKings. It's the most major DFS site out there right now, which has the most prize pool and probably the most players as well. And what happens in DFS, specifically DraftKings, is that you're allotted a budget of $50,000, and each player that you draft costs a certain amount of percentage of that budget. And so you have to draft quarterback, three wide receivers, two running backs, one tight end, one flex, and one defense. And obviously, the better the players, the more expensive they're going to be. And so you're basically trying to find a roster construction that kind of fits within the budget, but also has players who will exceed their value at the price that they're at. Sometimes you might get a really good player who is very high price, who may just not live up to the price, and he might not be worth
And
the roster spot. So what we're going to do on this episode is talk about how we like to construct our lineups. We're not here to just feed you uh, information that every other, you know, DFS podcast, whatever, is feeding you. We're going to talk to you about our thought process behind certain plays, not just from a straight up football standpoint, but also from a game theory standpoint, which is very important if you ever want to win the top prize on some of these GPP tournaments on DraftKings. And do you want to talk a little bit about GPP and cash designations, Drew?
yeah, sure. So cash is basically like the type of game where 50% of the people win that are involved. So you can enter like a 50-50 double up or a cash tournament, and it could be with 10,000 people, and close to 5,000 of them are going to double their money. So your odds of cashing in that are much stronger than the other format, which is called the GPP. About 20% to 25% of people are able to cash in that. So it's a much more difficult process. And there's different strategies and how to approach those games. With cash games, you don't want to approach it and take, you know, a high risk, high reward type of player per se, like someone that um, has a chance to get you 3 touchdowns, or they have a chance of not even playing. Like you want to avoid a situation like that. You want to get somebody that has a consistent workload, like a running back that's expected to get 20 to 25 carries, a couple catches, someone with a high floor. So high floor is how you approach cash. GPP is where you get into more of the game theory aspect because you want to differentiate yourself from the competition. Because you could construct an amazing lineup or have like a lineup with a bunch of great players, but if you're rostering people on your team that 30% of everyone else has as well, then you're not going to make that much money even if they do well. So you have to differentiate yourself in that aspect. That's where it's more of a high risk, high reward, ceiling shot type of approach.
Yeah, exactly. Like cash games, it's a flat payout. Whether you win 5,000th place or if you win first place, you're getting the same amount of money. So it doesn't matter if you win. You don't need that 1% owned guy who goes off for 30 points, right? Versus GPPs, where you place, it's a ladder. It's kind of a ladder, right? The farther higher up you place, the more money you're gonna get. And so that is why it's good to differentiate in GPPs. But something that's kind of funny to me, which I don't know if you noticed this last year, but I mean, you're mainly a GPP player, whereas I play both cash and GPP. And I think last year it was really weird because I felt like, honestly, GPPs were easier to cash than cash games. There would be weeks last year where I had the same score or I had the same score in a GPP game that I had in a cash game because I enter my GPP in both lineups, but I would cash the GPP, which is like a 20 to 25% payout on the field,
Mm-hmm.
and I wouldn't cash games with the same score.
Huh.
And I don't know whether or not it's because people are getting sharper nowadays when it comes to cash games, or what. I think there's so much info out there for fantasy football that it's easy for people to kind of just ingest and just regurgitate these cash game plays.
I think another thing too is with GPPs, like what I think our recommendation is if you're newer, probably enter ones where they're like single entry or 3 entry max or 10 entry max. Some of these GPPs, people are entering like 150 entries. So they are at a clear advantage because they can enter so many lineups. And that may be one of the reasons why you've seen that situation because maybe there's someone that's entering 150 lineups and like 100 of them are, you know,
Just
not
dead
not doing
lineups.
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that could be a factor as to why you're seeing that trend.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think I think my whole strategy when it comes to GPPs is if you can't max enter a tournament, you're already at a huge disadvantage. Like, if your budget is basically a 3 entry max $5 tournament, then enter it 3 times. Like when you're entering one lineup into a 150 max entry lineup, trying to win that milli maker or whatever, your best lineup is probably somebody else's like 27th lineup. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like you're already at a clear disadvantage because they're able to roster so many different kinds of variations to the lineup that they like, and you have one bullet.
They can diversify, whereas you're stuck with one lineup. And obviously, as human beings, we're attracted to that big prize. It's kind of like the lottery, and almost in that sense, like, oh man, like maybe I'll win the million. But like if you see that there's 3 to 500,000 entries going into the thing, the odds of you accomplishing that are very, 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 very unlikely.
Yeah,
So the better game approach is to look for the single entries, look for the small max entries, and that gives you a level playing field.
yeah, and honestly, the payout structure is so trash for the milli maker. It's 1 million at first, second place you get 100 grand, and then if you min cash, you're min cashing 1.5x versus 2x in a lot of these other smaller tournaments. And
Exactly. So that's something that you look at quite a bit, right? You look at payout structure when you enter.
yeah, I do. I like it when I know that I'm getting my money in good. Like I realistically, like I'm probably not going to win the Millie Maker unless I get extremely lucky. It's like hitting the lottery almost. And if I think that I might just get like, top 15 or I think one time I once was like top 100 in like a 150,000 Millie Maker tournament and I barely made any money there. I made like 5x my money. It was almost nothing. It's
Yeah.
like versus other tournaments when you're in the top, 10%, you're making a good amount. So
Yeah.
really
So
have to pick
payout
and choose what kind
structures.
of what
Yeah.
kind of tournament you enter.
Payout
So let's get
structure entry max is important.
yeah, exactly. So let's get moving along. How's your line of construction look for the week? Let's start with well, I guess we should talk about cash game line of construction first,
Yeah.
just
So I've
because yeah.
I've identified a couple players who I think are going to have quite a high floor. So do you want me to go like position by position, or how do you
Yeah,
want me?
just we can just briefly talk about cash game plays, just because we're
Yeah.
we're mainly focused on GPP. And like
Okay.
small disclaimer, we're doing this on a Friday afternoon, and we might not necessarily have the same line or the players that we're going to be touting right now, just because a lot of information can come out between now and Sunday morning that would make us change our lineups. But for the most part, our core, barring any big news, is going to be kind of the same.
Right. And so for cash, like you said, I'll briefly touch on it. Guys that I see with a high floor at quarterback, I think Carson Wentz is a really good play.
I think
Uh,
he's going to be the most popular cash game play this week.
I
I
can
agree.
totally see that. I
Yeah.
see that Philadelphia team has a ton of weapons. This game is projected to be sort of a blowout, and I think Carson Wentz will probably hit value before the third quarter. So I like him in a cash format. Um, Other players that I like in cash are Dalvin Cook and Austin Eckler. I think both of them have a really good chance of hitting value. I think the workload will be good for both of them. I think there's been like some kind of uncertainty about what Eckler's workload will be because you got Justin Jackson there as well. But in Draftkings particularly, it's a point per reception format. Austin Eckler is a great pass catcher. He's going to get a lot of dump offs from Philip Rivers. So I think that's a safe play. And Dalvin Cook, we already know, he's going to have a pretty big workload
Mm-hmm.
anticipated. And for wide receivers, I think Adam Thielen is a really safe play. There's news about Stephon Diggs being banged up right now. I think that's going to be a shootout, and I'm definitely going to have Adam Thielen if I'm playing cash. And another cash wide receiver that I like is Curtis Samuel. His price is extremely low. He's been hyped in camp for the Panthers, and I can't see a situation where he doesn't get at least 8 to 10 targets, and that is solid enough to get value for him. And I think I need a third receiver, right? So another cash receiver that I like. Give me a second.
I
Is
mean, it's the number one receiver on Tampa Bay, right?
Yeah, you could go.
But
You can't go wrong with
price like a
Evans.
number two receiver.
Oh, this guy. I think you can go right with either Evans or Godwin, because they're both expected to get a pretty high workload. They have no run game in Tampa, and that's another shootout that's anticipated. So I think Mike Evans or Chris Godwin are solid plays there. Um, for the tight end position, I think a guy that you like is Hunter Henry. I think it looks like a pretty safe play, like you've told me as well. I think that's a safe option. I think George Kittle also seems like a guy that's going to get a lot of workload. Can't go wrong with him either. I think he's a high floor play. And for defense, I like the Ravens defense. I like the Eagles defense, the Seahawks defense. I think you can be fine with any of those. So that's where I am at the moment.
Yeah, and I agree with most of these plays that you have. Quarterback, I think another couple more very popular quarterback picks this week for cash games. One is Jameis Winston taking on San Francisco. I think that game, everybody's projecting it to be a shootout. Probably will be a shootout with how bad those defenses are and how good those offenses are. Kyler Murray is getting a lot of hypes and well deserved. He's so cheap, and he's in this air raid Cliff Kingsbury offense that apparently they haven't shown us what they can actually do yet in the preseason. And Kyler Murray can run, so running quarterbacks give you a very high floor for cash games. And then the other quarterback is Lamar Jackson playing against Miami, another running quarterback. You basically have a running back one in Lamar Jackson, priced at only $6,000. So those four guys I think are very core to cash game plays. I think a couple of running backs too. I think Chris Carson, as the week has gone along, is becoming more and more hyped. And I think he is a very solid cash game option at only 5,700. You mentioned Eckler. I think Leonard Fournette is another solid cash game option because he's most likely going to be a 3-down back.
I think some of these guys you can actually play in both formats.
Yeah, definitely.
And I would probably take either Carson or Fournette. I didn't talk about my flex. That would probably one of those guys would be my flex.
Yeah,
as well.
And then the other two, like I think it's a really good week, a really easy week because of soft pricing to pay up for running backs. And I think most cash game lineups is going to have either one of Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley. And
yeah,
I think, yeah, and moving on, like I think if you're not paying up for one of those running backs, you're not having Hunter Henry, it's very easy to pay up for someone like Travis Kelce too against Jacksonville. Should be the number one option with Tyreek Hill being shadowed by Jalen Ramsey. Should be a very efficient way of him moving the ball around. I think he had very good games against Jacksonville last year too. Priced up at 7,100. Yeah, Kelce.
Yeah, Kelce had a 100-yard game last year against the Jets. So.
And then you basically mentioned all the good wide receivers. I think Samuel and Godwin are probably going to be the most two popular cash game plays for most everybody because of their pricing. I think Tyler Boyd is a sneaky good cash game play just because of his floor with AJ Green out of there. And the fact that Cincinnati will probably have to throw a lot to try and get back into the game.
He's got a guaranteed target share.
Yeah. And I think D.D. Westbrook would be a great cash game play as well. I think D.D. Westbrook priced only at 4,800 versus Kansas City. You know, Jacksonville is going to have to throw a lot to try and get back into the game. If that game projects to be a high-scoring game, as Vegas thinks it will be. So I think we kind of mentioned it. I think defense, honestly, for cash game just doesn't really matter. I don't really care much about defenses. You can plug in like Baltimore if you want. You can plug in the Eagles against Washington, Charge against Indy, Seahawks against Cincinnati, the Jets, whatever floats your boat. So now we get to the fun part, which is our GPP lineup construction. What do you have going on this week, starting from the quarterback position?
Both of us, we enter multiple lineups, so I think we diversify a decent amount, but we have probably our core plays that we stick to. For my main lineup, and again, with GPP, you want to kind of be able to differentiate yourself because, like you said, like Jameis Winston will probably be like 25 to 30% owned, and he may go ham, but if he doesn't go ham and you don't take him, then you have a leg up on the competition.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned right there, like for me, Jameis Winston's a complete fade in GPP just because he's the second highest priced quarterback, and he's also projected to be one of the highest owned quarterbacks. So like all he needs to do is not get like a top 4 quarterback score this week, and you're already sitting pretty. Granted, you choose one of the guys who outscores him, which can be pretty likely. I think there's a lot of really good quarterbacks in really good spots.
Yeah. So I am in my main lineup. I'm actually taking Matthew Stafford. I think he is in a good spot against a Patrick Peterson-less Arizona secondary that's starting a couple rookies. And I anticipate him having a very good game this coming Sunday. And I will likely be stacking him with either Kenny Golladay or Marvin Jones. I think you can kind of take your pick depending on what your budget ends up being, because Marvin Jones is about $1,500 cheaper, so that could be a benefit of taking him. But I'm cool with either one. That's definitely something that I'm going to be doing this weekend. Another play that I have in mind, I know you mentioned Chris Carson for cash. I actually like him for GPP. This might not be a play that's like differentiating myself, but not every play you make has to differentiate.
Yeah.
You can still have a couple that are, quote unquote chalky.
Yeah.
I think Chris Carson is in a good spot this weekend. And my ceiling shot for the week is Darius Geis.
Hmm.
I think despite the game being projected to be a blowout, I think he is going to actually get work on all three downs. They've already talked about Adrian Peterson possibly being a healthy scratch. I know there's concern about Chris Thompson being involved in the pass game, and you would probably anticipate him being on the field in the second half if they're losing by quite a bit. But I think Darius Geis is going to get a huge workload, and I think he will be on the field for passing down. So that's my ceiling shot for the week.
And you're not afraid of how good that Eagles defense can be, how they can control the ball too with their run game in the second half, which would limit
I think
Geis's carries.
I think their defense is really good, but I think this price point is extremely juicy, and coupled with the fact that I think his ownership is also going to be extremely low. So
I
I'm
think both of those will be very true. Low ownership, low price.
yeah,
But it's whether or not he's going to get the protection.
and
And you think so?
that's kind of what I'm gambling on here. So that's kind of my differentiating like pick of the week is Darius Geis. But I think you've made great counterpoints to me about him with Chris Thompson earlier in the week, and that could very well hold true. But I think he's in a good spot at this price point. I think this might end up being the cheapest you see Darius Geis for the rest of the season.
Oh, I completely agree. I don't think you're going to get. I just wish it was a better matchup for the Redskins, but what can you do?
Yeah. And then I'm gonna skip over wide receiver real quick. I'm gonna go to tight end. My main play of the week for tight end is gonna be Delaney Walker.
I love that play.
I think he's in a good spot to get a huge target share. I think Mariota historically has gone to him like when he's needed a bailout. I think that's his favorite target. I know the injury was brutal last year, but I think he's fully healthy now. He's pretty much been consistent throughout his entire career, and I think he's in a good spot to get a lot of targets and a decent amount of catches.
No concern that he's 35 years old coming off of a brutal ankle injury.
There's always concerns with that, but I love his price this week, and I think that Cleveland offense will be putting up numbers. So I anticipate Tennessee needing to throw, and when they do that, I think Delaney Walker is a good bet to get those catches.
Okay.
And some of the other wide receivers, let's see. I think you mentioned D.D. Westbrook as a cash play. That's actually a guy that I'm going to be taking in GPP. I think he's in a good spot to far exceed his price point of 4,800 in what people are actually anticipating to be a shootout, even though Jacksonville's defense is really good. So I think in GPP, D Westbrook is a perfectly viable play. And my last receiver, probably like out of the expensive tier, I do like Adam Thielen both in cash and GPP. I think he's in a great spot to hit or exceed value in both. And then I think defense, like the same ones that I mentioned in cash, I will. The main defense I'm probably going to be rostering this week is the Seahawks because I do like stacking my running back with my defense, and I'll be having a lot of Chris Carson. So stacking Chris Carson and Seahawks is going to be a play that I make quite a bit. Before you go into your picks, can you talk to the people about why stacking is like a strategy in GPPs?
Yeah, so a lot. I think stacking in recent years has become more of a strategy. I feel like people kind of neglected that a couple years ago, but nowadays, like people are more and more likely to stack because what happens is if you even like a lot of game stacks happen right now. Like you just take players from both games of the same game, thinking that oh, if this offense does well, then this offense will have to play hurry up while the other defense is playing prevent defense. So that's a lot of extra stats right there. And stacking works well. Like you can take running back from team that's favored to win with the QB and the wide receiver, or a QB and a tight end from the team that's trying to catch up, and that's one way of getting points because if you take the number one wide receiver and the QB from the team that's projected to lose, they're probably going to be throwing a lot, trying to catch up in the fourth quarter, and if they hit on a touchdown, that QB is getting you 4 points, and that wide receiver is getting you 6 points.
Plus the catch and the yardage.
Plus all the catch and the yardage, yeah. And then if you're playing the running back from the team projected to win, that they're probably going to feed him, in the fourth quarter. He's going to get a lot of carries, and all he has to do is just break one carry for I don't know, like 40 yards, and that's an extra 40 yards and a TD. You get 10 points right there.
Yeah, and those
So
running backs are, and DraftKings has these bonuses for hitting 100 yards, and somebody like Chris Carson, who's anticipated to get a huge workload, he may break off 120 yards for the game and get that bonus, and that ends up adding to your point total. And then, like you said, like if the team's ahead in the fourth quarter, they're going to be rushing the passer with their defense, and that creates more turnovers, that creates more sacks, that creates more statistics for whatever defense you pick. So, and those things kind of go hand in hand.
they're all correlated. Yeah, exactly. And so if you choose a game that you think is going to be very low owned and that game goes off, then you're sitting really pretty if you're getting a QB at like 5% ownership or running back at like 5% ownership and the wide receiver tight end defense at low ownership and that game goes off for like 70 points.
Yeah.
And like I just want to mention a couple of games this week that I feel are very likely that people are going to be game stacking. I think SF and Tampa Bay is a game where I feel like a lot of people will be trying to stack players from that game. And it might in GPP, it might even just be better to just avoid that game entirely.
Yeah, because it's going to be high ownership and, like you said, game theory. So there's different types of stacking. There's game stacking where you're stacking players from two teams just in one game, and then there's like positional stacking, like stacking a quarterback with their main wide receiver, and every time that quarterback throws to that wide receiver, it's like getting double points. And there's also running back and defense stacking where that your team's like anticipated to win by a lot, so they're going to run the football a lot. They're going to control the possession. Defense isn't going to be on the field very long, and when they are on the field, they are going to be rushing the passer. And obviously, when that happens, there's more turnovers generated.
Yeah, when you're in the fourth quarter and you're dropping back to throw, and you're playing against a ferocious defense that gets to the passer, like that defense is going to put up some sacks for the week for sure.
Yeah, and turnovers potentially or touchdown. Yeah. So sorry, go ahead and give us your GPP picks.
Yeah, so I'm kind of back and forth still on my quarterback picks. I really like Jimmy Garoppolo. I think the same reason why people like Jameis Winston, I like Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he's going to come in at a much lower ownership at a much lower price. And with how badly he performed in the preseason, I think it's very likely that game shoots out. And I think SF has like a 27-point implied team total. Touchdowns are going to come from somewhere. And at 5,800, Garoppolo doesn't really need to do much to exceed value. And that Tampa Bay defense really isn't that good against the pass.
Yeah. And like you said, recency bias sometimes can play to your benefit because people heard about Garoppolo throwing like 5 picks in practice back to back or whatever it was. And that news is fresh in the mind of a lot of players. So they will likely avoid him. And that creates a situation where you may be able to take advantage. The game has a high implied point total. Yeah. And he may throw for 3 touchdowns and 300 yards. Who knows?
Yep. And the other two guys that I'm kind of still thinking about, one is Jacoby Brissett at only 4,400. I'm on the team of thinking that Brissett is not a terrible quarterback. I think he's very, very adequate. He's not Andrew Luck good, but I think he's good enough. And he's priced like a backup quarterback.
He's priced like a QB3.
Yeah. And so like that kind of salary flexibility allows you to pay up for other people. And with the fact that Indy is like underdogs to the Chargers by a touchdown, I think Brissett's going to have to come out and throw a lot in the fourth quarter. And they have guys who these short like Jack Doyle or even Naheem Hines, like they have guys who he can target to bring them back in the game. That's a lot of stats that he can put up in garbage time.
And he doesn't only put up much.
At only 4,400, he just needs like 10 points and he's already 2xing. But 4,400. Yeah, if he gets like 14 points, he's getting you 3x already. So that's a pretty solid line. And then the last guy that I'm trying to go back and forth on is Josh Allen, only because I love playing Josh Allen. He's playing against the Jets, who have a good defense, but not great.
I think
And
Quinnen Williams is a beast, so
yeah,
that's
yeah.
a big concern.
But Josh Allen has shown that he can uh, succeed against beast defenses. Like I think he beat the Vikings last year with
That was a huge. Wasn't that like a big gambling upset
that
early in
was a
the?
huge upset. And it's
Yeah,
like Josh Allen can do it with his legs. I think he had like 2 games or 3 games that he had at least 100 yards rushing last year and a couple of touchdowns. And so that's basically a running back one priced at 5,600 and
and
his receiving core.
that's huge because the quarterback can get that 100-yard rushing bonus as
Yep.
well. So that's 13 points just from running.
Yep.
That's insane.
Yeah. And he added in a weapon, which I'm going to segue into. Like John Brown and Josh Allen together, I think are a great correlation play. Like all you need from Josh Allen, John Brown is
One
one,
play.
yeah, is just one big play, like one 60-yard touchdown, and boom, you're sitting pretty, holding those two guys at uh, low ownership and low price. I think John Brown's only 4,300 this week.
I'll add to that another play that I like from the Bills that's not being really talked about is Cole Beasley. I think he could get a lot of targets.
He could.
Could be a guy that ends up with like 7 or 8 catches. He's always been a PPR type of receiver.
Yeah, that one PPR, 1 point PPR in DraftKings comes big for those possession receivers like Cole Beasley. And there's a lot of hype that he's getting targeted a lot by Josh Allen during camp. So, and against the Jets, like if they're projected to lose, they're what? They're 3 point underdogs. Yeah, like they might have to throw. And Cole Beasley, we've all know that he can be the guy that you throw to when you're in the 2 minute drill.
Absolutely. And at 3,600, he just needs like 4 or 5 catches to.
Yeah, exactly. And some of my other GPP wide receivers that I really like. I think when the week started, Tyler Lockett was projected for very high ownership, but it seems like everybody's is kind of they're kind of getting off of Tyler Lockett. I don't know why. Maybe because DK Metcalf is playing. I don't think that would be a big enough reason.
I
But
think people are anticipating a blowout, so they're probably anticipating a lot of Chris Carson.
so more reason for me to like Tyler Lockett. His target share on that offense is going to be insane. And I don't think it's good if you play both Carson and Lockett on the same team. I think that's where negative correlation comes into play. But if you're not playing Chris Carson, I think you totally play Tyler Lockett in your GPP lineup. And right now I see him at like single digit ownership and sign me up for Tyler Lockett at single digit ownership. Number one option for Russell Wilson, who had a perfect passer rating with Tyler Lockett last year. Why not go back to him with especially now with no Doug Baldwin there?
So you're banking on them not feeding Chris Carson in that scenario, though, right?
I mean, they're gonna if they're blowing out Cincinnati, they're gonna have to score touchdowns to blow them out. And I feel like besides Chris Carson, Tyler Lockett has the most touchdown equity on that team.
So that's your pivot for GPP because you're anticipating, hey, like Chris Carson's probably going to be heavily owned.
Well, to be fair, my pivot would technically be Rashad Penny.
Okay.
I think Rashad Penny is going to have a huge. We don't know how big of a role he's going to have in the offense, but from everything that we've heard in the offseason, it's going to be a decent split. And with no Mike Davis there and just a two-way split, Rashad Penny can easily vulture a touchdown from Chris Carson.
And what's his price right now?
Rashad Penny is at something cheap.
It's probably like 3 to 4K.
He's 4.9, which is 800 less than Carson.
Okay. I think for me personally, I wouldn't take him at that price point. I see, like, if I would rather get a guy that is anticipated to get, starters workload, such as Darius Geis for 500 less, despite the game flow in that situation. I would rather get the guaranteed workload personally.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just pointing out that Chris Carson could be a fade opportunity come GPPs because of how high his ownership has gotten the last few days. Like,
Hmm.
I think right now I see him as the third highest owned running back, and for a good reason. They're projected to blow out the Bengals, and so Chris Carson's going to get run. But
Yeah.
when you're making GPP lineups and you're fading like the high owned plays. You don't fade them because you think that they're going to fail. You fade them hoping that they're going to fail, and you're rostering somebody else who can exceed their
Cap.
value at around the same. Yeah. So it's like a trade off. Like, I don't think Chris Carson's going to fail, but in the off chance that he fails, a lot of people are going down with him.
And that's the game theory aspect of
Yeah.
GP.
So yeah, I think Lockett is a great play. And the last wide receiver that I kind of wanted to touch on, which you kind of briefly mentioned earlier indirectly, is Marvin Jones. You said you want to play Matt Stafford in GPPs. I'm all for playing Matt Stafford in GPPs. But if you're playing Matt Stafford, Stafford isn't the type of quarterback that you kind of just play by himself. Like, I think you totally stack him with somebody. They have Galladay there. They have Marvin Jones there, and I think Galladay is getting all the hype. Marvin Jones' price and what he can produce is going to be very valuable for the week. He's only 4,200 against that
I think
Arizona
he is at 4,800 and Galladay is
4,800.
63. So yeah, 1,500 is a big difference. I mean, that could be the difference between, a mid-tier running back and a, elite running back for the week,
Yeah,
you know?
and it's not like Marvin Jones is all of a sudden going to disappear off the face of the earth. Like, he still had a very good year last year, even though he was injured half the year. And he still generates a huge target share from Matt Stafford. I think he was averaging like 7 or 8 targets a game last year. And 7 or 8 targets, you get 4 catches for, 60 yards, lucky in on a touchdown. 4,800, you're already paying off that price. And so I think Marvin Jones is a great GPP play.
I agree with that.
Yeah, moving on to running back. So we kind of briefly touched on, like, I think running back is like the most fluid position right now because there's so many good running backs at like such a crowded price point that it just seems like public perception on who's going to be high owned or what's going on. It's going to be fluid all the way until Sunday morning. And so even earlier in the week when we all loved Chris Carson because we thought he was going to be lower owned, I feel like his price point or his projected ownership is getting to a spot where I'm getting a little bit uncomfortable rostering in GPPs. Whereas somebody who we thought was going to be highly owned earlier in the week, Austin Eckler, is now projected for about 15% ownership, I think. And 15% ownership for Austin Eckler at 5,500, I think, can totally be doable in GPPs. Um, I know there's a lot of uncertainty between his role and Justin Jackson's role. Who's going to be the red zone, end zone kind of guy? Who's going to be like the first two down back? But if I project Eckler to be like a 60-40 split, and the fact that the Chargers O line is absolutely trash, that they need to have these short routes, I think Eckler can be a very good GPP play at that price.
Yeah,
Um,
he's going to get a lot of dump offs from Philip Rivers. I mean, that's definitely going to happen. Screen passes.
and
Um,
that's where that one PPR comes into play, right?
exactly. So he's a great PPR play.
Yeah. Another guy that I really like for the week is on Johnson. I don't same reason why you like Stafford, same reason why I like Marvin Jones. I think that Arizona defense, like I have no idea who they're starting on defense without Patrick Peter. I mean, even with Patrick Peterson, that defense is bad. Without him, like this might just be like a high school defense, and I totally expect Detroit to score points in this matchup, especially because from everything that we've heard, this Arizona offense is going to be very fast paced, high octane. So I assume Detroit's going to score points, and nobody's really talking much about Detroit, and I think we can totally get Detroit players at sneaky low ownership. And so on Johnson at 5,800, same prices, the Leonard Fournette, the Dalvin Cook, the Chris Carson, but projected ownership probably 3 times less than them, I'd say. And there's a lot of uncertainty too with whether or not on Johnson's going to be this bell cow role because of all the guys that he has behind him still. But I think that I think it's well within reason. Like, why can't we expect big things, at least in this matchup? He just needs 1 or 2 touchdowns. One touchdown, I'm fine with. One touchdown, 80 yards. And if they're projected to win at Arizona, then they're probably going to feed him the ball in the fourth quarter. So Kerryon Johnson's one of my favorite GPP running backs for the week as well.
Fair.
Yeah, and do I have any like super out of the box GPP plays? Maybe Damian Williams. I don't know.
Interesting. That's a tough one for me.
That is a tough one. I think if you expect, like, I think Damian Williams was great last year in the role that he had. Like, okay, honestly, like at 6,300, I probably wouldn't roster him. Like, but it's just like, I think a lot of it is just all the negative hype that he's gotten ever since the LaShawn McCoy trade. And we still don't really know how Kansas City is going to utilize all their running backs, right? And if you bank on the fact that the hype is kind of overblown and Damian Williams is still getting the bell cow, his share of the carries at 6,300 and that Kansas City offense, like I think that is some guy who has running back one potential for the week.
He may not even be 3% owned, so that
he might not even be 1% owned.
Yeah, and that he could be a great GPP play, but he could also completely fizzle, and McCoy could get way more work than we anticipate, and could get nothing. But that's the game you play with GPP.
Yeah, that's the game you play, exactly.
That could be the to do it.
I probably won't be rostering Damian Williams, but if that's the kind of play that you want to make, he should be on your radar.
Fair. And what about tight end?
Tight end. So I've been coming back and forth against with this as well, but I think for GPPs, I think Travis Kelce makes for an excellent GPP play. Paying up for Travis Kelce at tight end means that you're already differentiating yourself, because most people don't really like paying up for tight ends in DraftKings GPPs. They like paying up for their running backs. But paying up for Travis Kelce means no Saquon or no CMC, and that's already 50% ownership of Saquon CMC down the drain if you roster Travis Kelce, who isn't even the highest projected owned tight end for the week. And I think at 7,100 with Tyreek Hill, I think we kind of touched on it earlier with Tyreek Hill being guarded by Jalen Ramsey, like Travis Kelce becomes like the de facto number one option if he wasn't already. And, I think, 7 catches, 100 yards, 1 touchdown isn't completely out of the equation for Travis Kelce.
That would hit value or exceed value right there.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other guy that I want to mention that I guess is going to be my kind of high ceiling out there play of the week is Mark Andrews for the Ravens.
Is that someone you're going to play in lineups where you have Lamar Jackson to stack?
I definitely will probably play Mark Andrews in my Lamar Jackson lineups to differentiate. I think that the Ravens have a lot of question marks right now on wide receiver. They have a couple of rookies, one of them not even completely healthy. Obviously, like the Ravens are projected to run the ball a ton, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do. But Mark Andrews at his price, with the hype that he's gotten in the offseason, and it's not like he was a bad player last year for them. I think the last few games of the year, if I can just bring up those stats real quick, so he had more than, his last, let me read you his game log for his last 4 games of the year. 2 for 31, 2 for 83, 4 for 54, 3 for 31, and a bunch of red zone targets to go along with it. I think he's definitely got the potential. People think that he might take the step forward this year too. And if the hype kind of matches his production, I think he can be a great GPP play at really low ownership.
Yeah, and again, he's so low priced that he really just needs like 4 catches.
And I mean, I'm not even expecting 4 catches. Like I'm totally expecting a boom or bust play with Mark Andrews. Like I'm playing that guy, not because I think he's going to give me a floor, but because at his price, I'm expecting maybe a ceiling play from him.
And Lamar Jackson's, even though he runs it like an insane amount, he's going to throw to somebody, and it seems like Mark Andrews is probably going to be that guy.
Yeah, and I think I read a stat somewhere about how most milli makers are won, or like high GPP. Like the GPP tournaments are won by stacking quarterback and tight end because that is the least likely stack because everybody's trying to stack QB wide receivers. But for you to differentiate, I mean, tight end is one of the hardest positions to get production and touchdowns from. So if you get a tight end that gets a touchdown and you stack him with that quarterback, like that's one way of really differentiating yourself in GPP lineups.
Will you be stacking your Travis Kelce play with Patrick Mahomes at all?
I think that's very that's one where I want to figure out where my lineup construction lies. I think you can totally play Travis Kelce by himself because he's good enough. You could like Mahomes is another guy you can play by himself too, but it's whether or not Mahomes' price at 7,100 at Jacksonville isn't the most appealing play for me, but I can see myself if I really want to differentiate lineups, but I feel like Mahomes is like a little bit down that list for me of quarterbacks that I want to roster in GPP games. Which
There's a lot of quarterbacks with better matchups.
yeah, but it's like the thing, like you get Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback, in the NFL right now at 8% ownership in a matchup where KC has the highest implied team total on the slate. Like that is one way of differentiating yourself. Yeah, he's expensive, but you know, Patrick Mahomes, 8% ownership could be a GPP play if you want to go that way.
You'll never get that again, probably.
Yeah.
He's going to be 15-20% owned.
Yeah.
More commonly than 8% for sure.
So it's just the whole thing about week one is you're trying to adjust to how the industry thinks these teams are going to behave. And I think people think that Jacksonville is going to be a good defense this year, and I don't disagree with them. And that's the reason why Mahomes' ownership is going to be so low.
Yeah, and that, again, creates a potential value where you can get in and kind of go with the game theory. People aren't going to be picking Patrick Mahomes. You get Patrick Mahomes, you stack him with Kelce. He throws 2 touchdowns to Kelce, and you're way ahead of the pace of everyone else if that happens.
Yep. And my GPP defense, I guess, that I would play. I actually kind of like the Chiefs defense. I think Chiefs are really good at creating havoc in in opposing teams' backfield. They're only 2,800 playing at Jacksonville. We don't know where this Jacksonville offense is at, right? Like Nick Foles, newly installed quarterback there. D.D. Westbrook, number 1 option, and Leonard Fournette, we don't really know where he's at too. There's a lot of uncertainty with Jacksonville, and I think we can play the Chiefs defense in GPPs because I know they had a lot of high ceiling games last year as well because they always get so far in front of other teams that they force a lot of teams to kind of throw and try and get back into the game. And last year when the Chiefs played Jacksonville, they had 22 fantasy points. So 4 interceptions, 5 sacks. Who knows?
I don't think that will be replicated, but I can see where you're going with this. And Chris Jones on the interior of the Chiefs line is like a beast pass rusher. So you're going to have to deal with that all day.
Yeah, and at only 2,800, I think they work well as a budget defense you can plug into your lineups.
Fair. So I think we pretty much covered the DFS aspect of it. If you guys have any thoughts or any comments, please leave it underneath the video. Let us know what your plays are. Let us know what you think of our plays. And I think we will probably revisit how we did on our next episode. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, that's perfect. We can see how well or how poorly we did. And I know we can analyze Yash's lineup when he gets here too next time on Monday.
Absolutely. And then before we go, I think we also would like to kind of talk about some gambling plays. Maybe just spend 5 to 10 minutes or less on that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Who's your pick for the week?
I think for me the safest play of the week is the New England Patriots at minus 5.5. That's where the line is currently. I think the Patriots are in a good spot to win by a touchdown or more. So if I was a betting man, and I am, and I could only choose one game this week, I would take the boring old Patriots and hammer that in.
I'm gonna speak on Yash's behalf right now. He wanted me to say that his pick of the week is going to be the Denver Broncos at -1. He
Interesting.
had it
And
at -2 last night, but because we're
yeah,
filming it this morning, it's moved
yeah.
back to -1 because of the Antonio Brown news. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and lock it in at -1 for him.
Okay. Broncos -1. That may even shift to even by game time. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting game for sure.
And my pick of the week, personally, I'm going with the Indianapolis Colts at +6.5. I think that uh, they're being extremely undervalued after this Andrew Luck injury. I think that I don't think he's worth as many points. I don't think Brissett is that bad, and I don't think people are down enough on how the Chargers are without Melvin Gordon. I think that and the fact that their offensive line is in flux and no Derwin James, I think there's a lot of you know issues that the Chargers have that are
They're
kind of going unlooked or
they're not a
overlooked
perfect
now.
team. They're not a perfect
Yeah.
team. It means
And so like if Luck was fully healthy, like this game would probably be almost like a Chargers -2, but I think they're giving 4 points because of the Andrew Luck injury, and I'm willing to take that value because I don't think Brissett is that much of a downgrade, and I think the Chargers have stuff that they want to shore up a little bit too.
sounds good to me. Anything else you want to add about DFS or gambling?
Yeah, good luck. Be responsible. I think good luck is the most important thing. You need a lot of luck if you want to win. Things need to break your way.
But not
Uh,
Andrew Luck, right?
yeah, no Andrew Luck for us this week. Be responsible. I think if you most importantly, you don't want to let your emotions get the best of you when you play DFS and when you gamble on sports. And so be disciplined. And yeah, that's my advice for y'all.
Sounds good. This has been another episode of the Boardmen Don't Get Paid. I hope you guys join us next time when we review our picks for today. And I think we'll be putting out one of these weekly, going over our picks for DraftKings, giving our gambling play of the week, and sort of roundtabling on that. But I hope you guys enjoy it, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Peace.